night I dreamed I was walking in the woods back home. No moon in a black sky, I was all alone. And a voice said, see all these shackles and chains, and blood and rope in the trees. They're your burden to keep, till every single beat down soul is free.
That's Keeping My Brother Down, a track from Nashville singer-songwriter and guitarist Kevin Gordon's 2024 album, The In-Between. I've been a fan of Kevin's music for a long time, and it was great to catch up with him recently. We talked about his early days growing up in Louisiana, his early punk band, his move to Nashville, and also the musicians, including Keith Richards, Scotty Moore, Levon Helm, Webb Wilder, and Irma Thomas, who've performed his songs. Stay tuned for more music and great stories from a very gifted musical artist.
Chief of police, water can and taser gun, all in the name of keeping the peace. Selma to Ferguson, protesters on the run, dogs and barricades. Always there's a white light circling some guy.
Welcome to Frets with DJ Fey, the place to hear great music and interviews with fantastic musicians. Stay tuned. Kevin Gordon, thanks for taking the time to do this today.
Oh, you're welcome, Dave. My pleasure.
I associate you with Nashville, but you were born in West Monroe, Louisiana, right?
Well, I was actually born in Shreveport, 90 miles west. There's some still inaccurate information out there on the internet. Go figure.
Of course.
But I grew up in Monroe.
I think Webb Pierce was from West Monroe.
Yep. Little Walter was from outside of Alexandria.
Oh, well. It was Webb who wrote the classic In the Jailhouse Now, sung by both Jimmy Rogers and, of course, the Soggy Bottom Boys.
Yeah.
So.
Amazing. Yeah.
Well, what type or types of music do you remember hearing, like, for the first time when you were growing up in Louisiana?
I think the stuff that I heard first that really stuck with me, and this was when I was a little kid, pre-10 years old, was Jerry Lee Lewis and Ray Charles.
Nice.
My folks, even though they were, Beatles generation people, their tastes tended to run a little behind that. So they would occasionally have these parties on a weekend night, and it was, I just remember hearing those three Ray Charles country records. I don't know if they had all three, but it was, from those sessions. And I don't even think it was the Jerry Lee Sun stuff. I think it was the Mercury stuff that came after that. But, it was enough to give me the idea that this was something I really dug and had literally a physical reaction to. I would apparently often just start dancing spontaneously during these parties, which I'm sure was amusing for the adults, drinking down the green daiquiris. But that's probably what I remember the most. I mean, they used to take me to concerts. I think they snuck me into like a Fifth Dimension concert.
Wow.
I think what else? We went to several, but yeah, music was always around, thankfully.
It's funny when you said that. I always think about that too, because my parents were of the generation that most of people their age were listening to, like, I don't know, late 50s, early 60s, rock and roll or Beatles, but they were more, my dad was really into jazz, and they were kind of, they had very interesting musical tastes, and so they did expose me to a lot of good stuff. Yeah, I remember when I was young, my dad took me to see I think when I first started expressing interest in guitar, you went to see Andre Segovia, which was pretty wild. I mean, Segovia never said a word the entire time. He just came out, sat down, played, and then got up and took a bow. I mean, he was pretty old at that point, but that was pretty heavy for me too. It was like, wow, that's pretty cool.
That's amazing. Wow.
Well, was guitar the first instrument you learned to play?
Well, still learning.
Me too.
It's kind of it's a bad day to talk to me about that. I haven't practiced regularly for a while. I've just started back this past week, and there are moments of extreme frustration with self. But anyway, yes, I had a great aunt gave me like a plastic body nylon string acoustic when I was about 8, but I couldn't get used to, even with nylon strings, I couldn't get used to the feeling of my fingers being sore. Mm-hmm. So I let it go for the sake of other youthful pursuits, and picked it up again when I was 17, 18. My girlfriend's mother at the time, she was of that, probably the last generation of people who, just kept a guitar on the wall, hung on the wall for recreation, for amusement, and she had like this really cool, it was a copy of a Gibson Hummingbird. But I remember it being a really cool guitar, But she found me a little acoustic guitar at a thrift store, and gave that to me with a Xeroxed, chart of chords, of basic chords, and said, "Here you go, kid," So, I would take lessons every once in a while, but it was like either my teacher would quit teaching or move out of town, or
right.
There was always some unexpected end to it. So in the meantime, I would try to learn off of records the old-fashioned way, But
Well, at what point did you start playing music with other people, or either like joining or starting bands?
That would have been in high school before I picked up the guitar again. I was singing in a band, my high school classmates, and we did I think our repertoire consisted of 23 Ramones songs and one Sex Pistols song.
Nice.
But the guitar player in the band was a guy who lived about a block away from me at the time. And he was one of these guys that he was just super smart. And he spent all his time, it seemed, when he wasn't at school, in his room, reading science fiction novels and, listening to stuff like, Queen was a big band for him, and things like that were not quite in the same wheelhouse as what we were playing, But yeah, it was interesting. And our drummer his favorite drummer was Neil Peart. So,
right.
So getting him to do Ramones songs and not,
break into Neil Peart.
Yeah, kind of hilarious. But man, it was fun. It was fun. We had a good time. But then, then after that, it was like sophomore year of college. I had a little band. By this time, I was playing guitar, and we were doing like rockabilly stuff pretty much. But I think we only played in public once, which is probably for the best. The interest of the public health, But, you do what you can, learn from it and keep going,
Right. Hey, I want to talk about Plug. Plug makes it easy for you to purchase the personal technology you need at 40 to 70% off retail pricing. What can you get from Plug? Certified pre-owned devices including iPhones, Androids, AirPods, Macs, smartwatches, accessories, and more. I originally didn't even want an Apple Watch, but I got one from Plug and I love it. I wear it every day. Your purchase is backed by their unmatched 1-year warranty and 30-day money-back guarantee. One more very cool thing, Plug is dedicated to helping reduce e-waste around the globe. To date, Plug has helped save over 1 million devices from reaching landfills, and they're looking to double that number by 2025. Link to Plug Tech from the show notes, and check out all the great deals and savings on certified pre-owned devices. Plug Electronics. Check it out. Well, in your college years, you earned a master's degree in poetry from, was it University of Iowa?
Yeah, I got a BA in English from the state college that I went to that was there in Monroe, and then went to Iowa for grad school, and got a master's in creative writing. It was the Iowa Writers Workshop, which is a famous and infamous institution, and I was in the poetry workshop, and we were, as I like to say, we were the juvenile delinquents of the writing program. Just got in all kinds of trouble. But along the way, I had lots of time because it was a studio degree. It wasn't an academic degree, rigidly anyway. So you had a lot of time to yourself to read or write or whatever else you were doing. So I just remember having those Freddie King instrumental records, and I also had an Eddie Cochran, this really rare live record. So I was going back and forth between learning, trying to learn Hideaway the right way, and from the Eddie Cochran record, there was a version of Milk Cow Blues.
Oh yeah,
on that record, and the solo he took was just like, I want to do that, and just really captivated by it. And by this point, I had a Gretsch. It wasn't a 6120, but it was, what was it, 64, 65, Nashville, which probably would have still been called some sort of Chet Atkins model. It was one of the ones with the double cutaway and fake F-holes, but, still very much had that sound, at least to my ear then.
Yeah, my brother, he lives out in California, but he has a beautiful 62 Gretsch Country Gentleman that I get to play occasionally when I see him. It's just so nice. But speaking of Milk Cow Blues, there's been a lot of people have covered that, but I always love the very early, the Kinks covered that very early on, and it's such a great version.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, at what point did you start writing songs after getting your degree, or was it before you got your degree?
Oh yeah, I was confused even before then. I just remember as soon as I literally got a guitar in my hands, maybe not in high school, but once I was in college, my stepdad found me it was a 335 copy made by Ovation, of all things. I think he paid $80 for it, So electric guitar, oh man, here we go, I just remember almost as soon as I got that guitar, like, of course I was obsessively trying to learn stuff, but I was also trying to write, and it just seemed like something that, needed to happen. So, it was something that stuck with me, apparently. It wasn't until I got to Iowa that I started writing songs that were, I guess I would say, close to what I've been doing for 30 years. Mm-hmm. Before that, in college, I was writing songs that were sort of like, X was a big influence. So you had some of the rockabilly thing in there, but it was also a lot of, of the sort of punk rock energy, I guess.
Well, do you remember the first time you performed one of your original songs, either for an audience or maybe you just tried it out on some friends?
I think it had to have been probably our first bar gig, which was hilarious. We had no idea, about money or what to ask for, or should we ask for money? What do we charge at the door? It was owned by a father and son. And like many people in Monroe, you didn't know how they ended up there or why, but there must be some nefarious reason, I'm not saying these guys were criminals, but they were basically running a bookie operation out of the back room and a club out of the front room. And the waitresses I think there was one of them who was of age. The other three were 16 or 17.
Wow.
It was just this amazing little, world of depravity. And because my band, me and my friends, it was such a small scene in Monroe, for the sort of punk rock people, that we would all tell each other where the bar was that was friendly at the time, to us. And this place, it was called Harry's, welcomed us in because, I don't think there was much happening for those guys before then, and, other than the illicit activities. But so we played there the first time for half a case of beer, no money.
Nice.
And, packed it. It wasn't a big room, but, it just felt like, wow, this is amazing. And I don't think much audio exists from those times. Thank goodness. But that's probably when I first started.
Well, in the early 90s, you moved to Nashville. Was the intention to be around the Nashville music scene, or was your goal to actually work in the music business at that point?
I had this, what now seems like a fantasy, that I could move here and keep doing what I wanted to do, and that somehow the songs I was writing could fit into, the mainstream country market. This is coming from a guy who had no interest in mainstream country radio. It's like, for me, like, Steve Earle and Marty Stewart were about as country as I got. We used to wear those early records out when I was playing with Bo Ramsey in Iowa. We would wear those records out, which were then on cassette, the Hillbilly Rock Marty Stewart record and the first two Steve Earle records on MCA. So I thought, based on that it might work, and did, succeed, I guess, as far as, I got a little publishing deal about a year after I moved here. And it was with a manager who represented three country artists who were kind of left of center at the time. It was Leroy Parnell, Pam Tillis, and this guy named Marty Brown from Kentucky, who was, God bless him, kind of a lunatic, just really manic, but very, very traditional, like Hank Sr. kind of vibe, So it sort of made sense. And the manager, Mike Robertson was his name, he thought that I was going to write something that one of his artists would record. And, good idea. And thanks for paying my rent for a year. But it was like the worst creative year of my life, frankly. And I guess it was, but I got exposed to that whole Music Road thing, which was a new world to me, I have an appointment to write at, Warner Chapel at 10 a.m. with this person that I've never met before. But my manager thinks I'll get along with swimmingly, or my publisher. And, that was just totally opposite of any sort of artistic or whatever creative impulse that I'd ever had. I couldn't do it, man. I tried. But right after I got let out of my publishing deal after a year, I met my friend Gwil Owen, and we hit it off immediately and wrote 4 songs that ended up on the first Shawnee record, Cadillac Jack's Number One Son. We wrote 4 of those songs within 2 or 3 months, I think, 2 of them in one night. So that showed me that, the co-write thing can work if you're with the right people who, if you understand each other.
Right.
Yeah, it was a rough first couple of years in town, but it was, compared to trying to move to New York or LA, it was a piece of cake. It was back in the South, which is kind of, it felt more like home, even though Tennessee compared to Louisiana is, they're still worlds apart. And I already had friends here who were musicians that I knew from Iowa. I may have known a couple of people from Louisiana. I don't remember. But so it was just an easier place to land, I guess.
hot asphalt in his white shoes. Trying to talk another fool into that coupe on the corner. Well, it ain't ever run and it ain't ever gonna. Doctor on dominance, fault and inspections. Never let my pappy in my house of correction. Cadillac Jack's number one son. Dirty hands get the dealing. I'm just a chip off the busted line. I'm Cadillac Jack's number one son. Yeah, the rap is ill to ride around a telephone pole. Land is safe in the cuffs of the state patrol. There was fire on my breath and blood on the wheel.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hey, quick reminder to check out Frets with DJ Fey on YouTube. Subscribe for free and you'll find extras like shorts and videos featuring live performances of Frets guests. Subscribing really does help keep the podcast going. And did I mention? It's free. Now, back to the show. Well, I know our friend Joe V. McMahon produced a lot of your albums over the years, as well as providing guitar work. But you mentioned Cadillac Jack's number one son. That was produced by Gary Talent, who was the bassist in Springsteen's E Street Band. How did he get involved in the making of the record?
I had a fan at the time who was also an attorney who wanted to, get some experience doing entertainment law. And hell, I was young and green and broke. And so he offered to do some stuff for me pro bono. And he knew, I can't remember how he met Gary, but they were acquaintances. And this attorney, Doug, helped me raise some money to record what would become that first Shawnee record. So we actually had that record done, a year and a half before I got a deal to release it on Shawnee. So yeah, we brought Gary in and I really liked him immediately. And, of course, pretty much anybody does who meets him. He's just a normal guy. He's just, sweetheart. In addition to being an incredible bass player and a really good producer. It was just a great experience. He had his own studio with a guy named Tim Coates, who's a great engineer here in town. So we worked there and learned so much about how to get good sounds out of a small space. And, heard some good stories along the way about, Springsteen and people like that. Danny Federici, I remember, came to town while we were doing overdubs and actually ended up playing organ on a couple of things on that record. That's where I met Southside Johnny, who I ended up touring with for a little while during a short period when he was wanting to do a stripped down thing without horns. He wanted to do blues. He wanted to do little Walter songs. But anyway, so yeah, meeting Gary was a great experience.
It's a great record. I've had it for years, and I'll talk a little bit more about how I came to be aware of Cadillac Jack's number one son later, but we'll get to that. Well, you became known for and very much praised for your songwriting over the years, and your songs have been recorded by a lot of great people, including Levon Helm, Keith Richards, Webb Wilder, Irma Thomas, who's still... She still put out an album last year.
Amazing. Yeah.
She's great. The duet with Lucinda Williams on your album Down to the Well is beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
And that track, that appeared on a couple compilation albums, I think.
Yeah, it was on the Oxford American Music CD, whatever they called it then. And it was on what was it called? An alt country compilation. It was before we called it Americana, that a label called Dual Tone put out 96, 97, I think. It would have had to have been after that because we cut Down to the Well in 99. So yeah, it was good to get it out there. I remember getting a call from the guy who was putting those compilations together for Oxford American at the time. I was working at an art gallery downtown here, and at the time, I was up on a ladder about 15 feet in the air trying to drive a masonry nail into this mortar so that I could hang this huge painting on this wall. And the phone rang, and I answered it, and it was Rick Clark, who used to produce all of those Oxford American compilations. And he said, just wondering if you would mind if we, put Down to the Well on our compilation next year. And I almost fell off the damn ladder. I was like, are you kidding?
Wow.
It was really good. It led to some good things. I played one of the big stages at Jazz Fest in New Orleans the next year, and several other things. Unfortunately, the label did not find it worthy to think about placing an ad in the magazine about the record, which completely still baffles me. But alas, it's the way it goes with labels sometimes. Yeah, and the Lucinda thing was actually, I won't say it was an afterthought, but it was we had tried to get her on the Cadillac Jack record, but the timing just didn't work out, and we were going to have her sing on Pauline, and she didn't think it was in the right key for her, so it didn't happen. But Down to the Well, we had recorded the whole thing and given it to the label, and they had asked us to remix about half of it and do a little bit of supplemental recording on a couple of tracks. And that's when my friend Bo Ramsey, who was one of the producers on that record, had the idea to reach out to Lucinda about singing on Down to the Well. And because before then, we just had a stock, background vocal, and I sang the second verse. And we just got lucky. Lucinda was around and available, and she came over to the studio where we were working. And, I think what you hear on the record is like the second take. So it was just a real stroke of luck there that happened.
That's great.
Mud-colored dogs guarding shotgun shacks. A red door on a green Cadillac. Hot wind blowing smoke through graveyard streets. A face I recognize looking right through me. Ain't going down to the well no more. Believe I've had my fill. Work the ground and I'm done got sore. Ain't going back down to the well.
You play that dive 20 some odd years. With the faith and whiskey, you killed your fear.
Hey, this is Kevin Gordon, and you're listening to Frets with DJ Fey.
I mentioned Joe McMahon earlier. When Joe was on one of the early episodes of this podcast, I was reminding him, and see if you remember this at all, that I met you and Joe when you guys were playing a St. Louis show years ago. And Joe's sister Michelle and I have been friends for years. And that particular show, you and your band crashed at her place for the night. And before even heading to the venue, we were all kind of hanging out over at Michelle and Dave's and getting ready to head to the show. And I'm trying to remember if that was Twangfest or if it was, I almost feel like you guys played the Duck Room in that show. I don't know. It's been so many years.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure at that show is where I bought Cadillac Jack's Number One Son. So I've had that. Oh. It's sitting right here in the room.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, Joe's great. Obviously met him through his sister, but how did you guys, how did you cross paths and meet?
I remember sometime in the, 93 or so, I had a local gig and I needed a guitar player. I tried to get a mutual friend of mine and Joe's, a guy named Buddy Flett, who's a fantastic songwriter and R&B guitar player from Shreveport. He was living in Nashville at the time, and he was kind of a mentor to me when I first moved here. We would do things like go eat catfish on Fridays for lunch, and just talk about how it felt to do what we were doing, which was, writing songs that were not country songs in this town, and the comedy and tragedy of both ends of it. But I asked Buddy to do my gig, and he's such a wise guy, wise man, that he goes, you should call Joe. And he gave me his phone number. Yeah, you should call him, And so I just called him. He seemed interested. I think at the time he was playing with Joel Sonnier, who was a Cajun artist, Cajun guy from South Louisiana, who somehow, by the grace of the gods, had a deal with MCA at the time. And they were kind of trying to sell him sort of, I guess, as a Cajun Elvis sort of thing. And those are great records, and Joel was fantastic. He was a wonderful accordion player and singer. He was the real deal. Yeah, Joe was playing in Joel's band at the time. Yeah, so I just remember Joe was living over in Donaldson, and which is a suburb out by the airport east of here, not too far away. And I just drove over there and met him and took him, I guess it would have been a cassette at that point full of songs. So that's how we kind of got together. And he had an interesting history in that he spent a year at Berkeley, the music school in Boston, studying guitar, but bailed on it after a year. So he already had this real deep knowledge of music in terms of theory and how chords work together, et cetera. A lot of different influences. But, we both had a deep love of music that was primarily rhythmic in nature, like John Lee Hooker or Lightnin' Hopkins. So I think we both were kind of pointed in similar directions. And it was a partnership that just kind of grew over those next few years. It was great. And then Joe introduced me to Paul Griffith, a great drummer from Louisiana, who I used to see play when I was in college, still living down there. He was in a band with the guy I just mentioned, Buddy Flett, called A-Train. They were a very popular band in Shreveport. But Paul was living here at that point, and he was playing with, he played with a bunch of different people. Oh, hell, Carlene Carter, I think who else. But he was, for my thing, it was really great. Paul is just a wonderful, very distinctive player and grew up, right outside of New Orleans and took lessons from, real sort of heavy hitter local players there in New Orleans when he was a kid. So then, I met Paul and also Ron Oaf, who has played bass with me since Joe introduced us. And Ron, he has a tremendous history. He was in a version of the band circa 1983. He grew up with Levon Helm's nephew, Terry, and at some point got to join forces with Levon and Rick and Richard and Darth in a version of the band. But has played with a bunch of people, Delbert, and he was playing with Joel at the same time. Anyway, meeting Joe led to a lot of things as far as finally, sort of getting a rhythm section that really understood where I was coming from, maybe in a way that even I didn't understand at the time, But we had a lot of fun, man. It was unfortunately, some of those gigs on the road were more about the fun than the music. It took several years to kind of reassess. No regrets. Had a good time.
That's great.
Yeah.
Hey, Dave, what's something you've been doing for 45 years?
I've been attempting to get better at playing guitar for at least 45 years. And what about you?
Well, I'm part of a team who's been selling music for 45 years. It's Euclid Records' 45th birthday!
Yay!
And our NOLA store is turning 15.
Any plans to celebrate?
Oh, yeah. All kinds of plans, a big party. Stay tuned to our socials for details.
I've been a Euclid Records customer since the late 90s.
Oh, thank you for your loyalty. Yeah, 45 years of serving music lovers across the globe because we have our own shipping department. New and used vinyl, CDs, and cassettes. We do special orders. We do whatever it takes to get music into the hands of music lovers everywhere.
You also buy vinyl, right?
Oh yeah, we buy vinyl, also CDs and cassettes, for cash or trade. It's how we've amassed such a renowned collection, which you can shop 24/7 at euclidrecords.com. Wherever you are, Euclid Records is there.
Euclid Records is in St. Louis, New Orleans, and wherever you might be, 24/7 at euclidrecords.com. Well, you've recorded and released a lot of great albums over the years, and in 2024, your fantastic record, The In-Between, came out. I bought it digitally on Bandcamp when it became available, and I just ordered it vinyl, so I'm excited. I've been beefing up my vinyl collection, so I'm excited to get that.
Awesome. Thank you.
But not long after you started recording the album, you were diagnosed with throat cancer, which put things on hold. First of all, I'm thrilled you were able to recover from that, and it's very admirable that you picked up where you left off in the recording studio, and the result was a really fine album.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah, it was it was a special time. Definitely didn't see that coming. We had done one set of tracking sessions, which, for those who don't know music biz terminology, that's just where you go in and you are basically recording the band, the basic elements of the band that are going to be on the recording. And that's where you figure out your arrangement. It's just kind of the grounding for whatever else you add later. So we had done one set of tracking sessions in November of 21. And as we've often done, we take the luxury of kind of just listening to it and not be in a hurry and see what we want to try to go back and redo if we want to or what. So I guess it was in March of 22 that, I was sitting on the couch one night with my wife watching television and happened to lean back and, stare at the ceiling and I ran my hand down my throat, down the outside of my throat. Why I did that, I have no idea. But I noticed that things were not symmetrical. Yeah.
That's never a good sign.
No. And, I can be sort of paranoid about my health. So I was immediately concerned. And I had just had sinus surgery 2 months before that in January. So I went back to the guy who did that surgery, my ear, nose, and throat guy, thinking that it was possibly some side effect of having had that surgery. And he was immediately concerned, which didn't sit well with me, but ended up, going and getting, doing what you do. You go to the endocrinologist and get a biopsy, and fun stuff like that. And it took until late May before we had a diagnosis. And right after that, like a week later, we had already scheduled another round of tracking sessions with a different rhythm section. We just wanted to try some of the songs with a different band and see how they hit. So that was a very interesting time. Definitely felt a sense of urgency. So, and I remember working on songs like Catch a Ride, like the morning that I was going over to Joe's to cut stuff with this other band. So the whole thing took on a different emotional tone, I guess. The sessions went well. We ended up cutting more songs than we had planned on. But, I had this little problem I needed to get taken care of, and went to an oncologist and, got set up for what would be a very interesting summer, and ended up doing 7 weeks of radiation, and supposed to be 6 rounds of chemo, but only ended up doing 4. But had great doctors, and there just really wasn't much time to freak out about it, because they wanted to start treatment like right away. So my wife and I had a trip already scheduled to fly out to see our son in Portland, Oregon in early June of that summer. But the day after we got back, I was at the hospital, getting my first radiation treatment. And, it just becomes your new normal, it just becomes your job, And, I got to say that the people who worked in the radiation room and all that, the doctors, everybody made it as comfortable as possible.
That's great.
I was really lucky. And so I was done with treatment in mid-August. And of course, part of the question was, what's this going to do to my throat, to my voice? And as I like to joke with people, unfortunately, it didn't do anything.
I think most of us would say we love that it didn't affect your voice. So.
I mean, I do hear a little more of a rasp in my talking voice, but vocally, it's pretty much the same. And I think some of the difference is probably due to being a little older, as much as it is, having gone through that treatment. But so yeah, that fall, as soon as I was feeling good enough, because the worst part of treatment for something like that is the period immediately after you finish the treatment, because you've got all that poison in your system, and it takes a while to get out.
Sure.
So, but I remember, I think by October, I was recording vocals again. So really kind of got lucky, I mean, just the timing of everything, in addition to the obvious fact that I, knock on wood, recovered and have been fine ever since.
That's great that you came through. Okay. That's awesome.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I feel lucky for sure.
Well, I love Nashville, and I'm overdue for another visit. You've lived there for, what, close to 30 years, or is it 30 years now?
Oh, it's been 34, almost 34. Wow. Good Lord. What the hell happened? What happened?
That's right, because it was 92, I guess. That's right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Summer of 92. Yeah. I don't know what happened, but here we are. Yeah.
Well, when I am down there, I usually go to my favorite spots. I love Robert's Western World, of course, Tootsie's.
Oh, yeah.
I usually kind of tend to hit the same spots, exit in if there's a good show. Yeah,
sure.
Well, Kevin Gordon, thanks so much for doing this. I've been hoping to talk to you for quite a while now.
Sure, Dave. My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me. And let me know when you get to town.
Yeah, I'll call you up.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Please do.
Thanks much.
You bet, Dave. Thank you.
Six white horses here to ride. Man don't need but one. Crack that leather cross back, send him over the sinking sun. Hear that crowd roar when Johnny took a bullet.
You can find more information about Kevin Gordon and where to purchase his music in the show notes to this episode. As always, thanks for listening and stay tuned.